The 3v3 game mode is easily my favorite in Rocket League, but I feel like it gets no love. No one really grinds threes unless they're in a party with their mates. And I think it's because no one really knows how to play threes and how to win, especially while solo queuing. But that changes today. Now, before starting the video, I would like to clarify by saying that everything I cover today, all of the information in this guide comes from Coach Jonk and his team over at the Rocket League University. More on them later. To kick things off, let's list every major topic we're covering in today's video. 1. A deep dive into understanding the roles and responsibilities of the first, second, and third man, including mental and mechanical advice. 2. The differences between offensive and defensive positioning for all players, and knowing when and how you should play it. 3. What a layer is, why to avoid it, and the advantages of preventing them. 4. How to approach boost management in all positions. And 5. What zones are and how to control them to dominate the field. Let's start off with the first man and what you should do in order to be the best striker on the field. As a first man, you are the main attacker. You are the one that dictates the opponent's positioning, and you are the one that controls the majority of the play. When looking to make a play, you should be considering the type of play you can make depending on how much boost you have. In relation to the mechanical side of playing first man, a good rule to follow is if you have more than 60 boost, you can be independent and create your own play with whatever you see fit. However, if you have under 60 boost, limit your imagination to a more standard play that can also involve passes to your teammates. Those passes should really be direct or infield passes and should be instead done with the use of the backboard or while threatening a solo play of your own. Now, a good quote to go along with this is, if you're not threatening a solo play as well as a pass, your pass was never threatening to begin with. Another mechanical rule, or in this case, criteria to follow, would be a sort of first man priority tier list to follow whenever we have possession. Your first priority as a first man should be to create a solo play with a minimum of 2 touches. This is going to ensure you don't rush any rotations. It's always going to give time for your teammates to support you and allow for positive boost management and rotational flow. Your second priority as a first man is to pass the ball to an uncontested teammate. A good example of this is to pass the ball from midfield in our half up and across to our third man on the wall. Now, if this is done correctly and away from the play, this will allow for a quick counterattack that forces the opponents to reposition and challenge our now uncontested attacker. Your third priority is to get a high booming clear downfield, preferably into open space and across the field. This should be your last priority, as possession is the #1 concern for any first man in any game mode. If cleared correctly, your second and third should be able to follow a free ball. Now, let's discuss what an offensive versus a defensive first man is. An offensive first man is a player whose main mentality is playing for possession to create or continue attacks. Playing an offensive first man should be your main playstyle in most, if not all situations, because of its possession heavy dominance and consistent results if possession is maintained during all plays. A defensive first man focuses on proper positioning and decision making when we don't have possession. This includes early challenges or pre-jumping your opponents to shut down plays, both aerial or ground, that they try to start. The defensive first man is less common than an offensive first man because if you follow the steps provided throughout the rest of the video, your team should end up with possession for more of the game than the opponents, since an offensive first man is played if we have possession, and defensive first man is played if we don't. Applying first man in higher ranks, being a player that can think on the fly when given an opportunity for a breakaway will be a necessary skill, as well as being able to open opportunities for stronger counterattacks and create threats out of nowhere. A good example of this skill would be a player like Zen, as he is able to see a random bouncing ball near the wall as a quick self-pass setup. This will allow Zen to create an aerial attack high up on the wall and away from immediate pressure, which gives teams such as Team Vitality a competitive edge against everyone else playing in the RLCS. Now, to finish up with understanding the first man, let me introduce you to the first to third rotation. The first to third rotation is a means of making sure the player with the best approach is the one to make an impact on the play. In this example, we're the third man, correctly positioned deep and on the other side of the field, controlling an empty zone. Once our first man gets beat in the opponent's half by a deep clear, you will notice that it's going to be the third man who is the only one who can counter this clear, since our second man will be beat at the same time. A first to third rotation happens by the first and third man switching roles, while the second man holds their position to support the incoming attacker. If done correctly, your team should be able to hold pressure, keep good rotational flow, and continue attacking without the other team starting an attack of their own. Now, first man is done, moving on to second man theory. Let's start with one of the most important topics of this video, layers. Now, a layer is a form of second man positioning that heavily damages any rotational or positional structure. To run a layer, you have to be directly infield from your first man playing for an infield pass. Now, this should always be avoided because any half decent team will have midfield control in most, if not all of their defensive half. So if your first man gets beat, if your teammate is running a layer, they will be beat at the same time every time. This leaves your third man in a 1v3 for an extended period of time while they try to buy time for both you and your other teammate to get back and support. A layer is simply a wasted rotation and a terrible position. Proper second man positioning looks like this. Being around 1/3 of the field away from your first man and being directly behind them is the best way to approach a supportive and consistently punishing second man. This is because if you're positioned accordingly, you're able to follow up on any and all plays that result from your first man. Whether it's a clear beat, powerful or force 50 or any other variation of those, you'll be in the position to follow it up and continue the pressure. The only time this type of positioning doesn't work is when the 50 or challenge your first man receives is so powerful that it even goes over your head. If this happens, do not panic, as this is just a free ball for your third man to control, as something that powerful can't have opponents on it straight away. Now, a good mentality for a second man to have is to play worst case scenario until given reason to play otherwise. This is going to keep a healthy amount of space between you and your first man. It's going to minimize chances of double commits, and all while maintaining good rotational boost flow until it's your turn on the ball to make a play. Now, to explain this in a little bit better detail, a good second man position will have you most often close to a wall, playing what is known as the safe zones. Safe zone is an area including the side walls as well as around a quarter of the map towards the middle of the field. Everywhere else is what I like to call no man's land, and is where you'll be punished for playing without any teammate support. Another way we make sure we are positioned correctly is to learn to hold our position. Now, as the name suggests, holding your position when given no real reason to push closer to the play is an excellent means of staying open to whatever happens during the play. Pushing forward for no real reason is in most cases a bad move, since you're now leaving yourself and the space you give up vulnerable to being beaten with a deep clear. Last but not least, we have the third man, arguably the most important player on any threes team, as this is the player who is the team's last resort. As a third man, your main focus should be to keep good spacing, staying in the correct zone, collecting and or maintaining boost, and thinking 2 to 3 seconds ahead of the play. Mechanics wise, keep it simple with minimal flips to move around the field, maintain good momentum without wasting boost in the process, and be ready to eventually increase your speed once you transition into an offensive second or first man. Let's begin with going over good third man spacing. For maintaining good spacing as a third man, you must cover the part of the field that your first and second man aren't covering themselves. For this, a short graph can be drawn and visualized in front of each player's car, which looks something like this. Depending on how fast or slow the player is can determine how big or small the space gets, since it's on average how much space a player can cover in 1 second. For example, if both our first and second man are covering most of the right side of the field, us as the third man should be positioned here. Deep, just left at the center of the field and facing ahead of the play, which can be determined by the direction of the ball in correlation to the direction that the closest players are heading. Next on our list are zones, and these are vital to any good third man positioning, both for offensive and defensive purposes. For general use, if the play is happening outside of our defensive third of the field, the map can be split up into 4 quadrants. Depending on the zone that the ball is currently in, we as the third man should be in the zone diagonal to where the play is currently being held in. Using the last example, we can see that the play is in the top right zone. So, as we see here, our third man is covering the zone diagonal to the play. One important thing to note is that you can see that he's looking across the field and into the zone across from him. This is due to correct and natural rotational flow, as he is getting ready to move into a supportive second man position. The other really nice thing about playing zones correctly as third man is that if our first man goes for a bad 50 or a deep clear is made, our third man can cover and control the ball wherever it may go. The ball gets cleared across zones, perfect. we can control the ball in or close to our corner without opponents challenging immediately. If the ball gets cleared behind our second man and into or around our other corner, a first to third man rotation happens. As the third man regains control, second man holds that midfield position, and our first man rotates back across from the play and into our back post position. Now, I know this is a lot of information, I know this is a lot to take in, but trust me, if you pause the video, if you break things down bit by bit and you really take this in, threes is just going to be that much easier for you to digest, and as you play the game, it's going to become much more natural for you. Now, let's talk about zones in our defensive third. It should look a little bit something like this. Split our defensive third into 3 evenly sized sections. Whether you're defending opponents or starting a counterattack, no same teammate should be in the same zone as another, as this is only going to cause what is called defensive overlap. What's defensive overlap, you ask? Well, great question. Remember that little area we drew in front of each player to determine how much space they can cover in roughly a second? We're going to use that same concept here to help you understand why these 3 zones especially are important to follow to ensure proper defense against any attacking formation or play. If defensive zones are maintained properly, meaning no 2 teammates enter the same zone until given reason to do so, opponents will find it almost impossible to get through a brick wall like defense that you will create. Now, one more note about these defensive zones is how and where players should position. Let's take this scenario for example. Here you can see the first man challenging in the corner, the second man covering front post, and third man behind back post, which is much better than being slightly in front of back post. The reason this is done so well is because second man is right next to the net instead of being too wide and far away from being able to defend any real threats of the first man being beat, while the third man is comfortably spaced from the back post to allow for coverage of the backboard or counter-attacking opportunities in the mostly uncontested zone upfield from where they're positioned. With all this zone stuff out of the way, allow me to cover boost management, an aspect of the game that a lot of us really struggle with. Keep in mind that what I say next can easily apply to the way second man approaches boost management as well. For boost management, a great rule to follow is if you're below 60 boost, small pads are used for collecting boost, whereas if you're above 60 boost, small pads can be used for both collecting and maintaining boost. Now, when it comes to collecting boost from these small pads, here are some of the good boost paths you can take to collect as much as possible. Starting with the diamond pad line, this is the largest pad path out of them all, as you can go up or down the field and collect boost as you go. Generally, you will only collect 1/2 of one of the sides of this path, which will garner you 36 or 48 boost in total. However, if you are wanting to get one whole side, you can get almost a full tank without missing a pad. Another popular pad path is the middle line of pads. I'm not going to go too in depth with this one, but if rotating up the field, only get the first half before breaking off into one of the 2 offensive zones. And if you're rotating back, get as many pads as possible before getting too close to the play, then move behind the player and into your correct zone. Next on the list is the X pads, which are an unconventional pad path, but nonetheless useful. X pads are pad paths of small 4 boost pads in a row intersecting the midfield. These are used when rotating across the field, mainly on your way to the back post from your opponent's half. And for the last pad path I'm covering today, it's another simple one, the semicircle of pads in front of our net. This path is used when we're holding the center zone on defense or getting out of the way and rotating to the back zone as third man. This video is sponsored by Rocket League University, a private and premier online Rocket League coaching program designed to take your game to the next level. From offering over 140 hours of live coaching to their rank-specific training plans as well as an engaged and interactive community, this program is for everyone. Whether you're wanting a personal coverage of this 3 system or a deep dive into their 1s and 2s masterclasses, Jonk and his team over at the RLU will help unleash your competitive potential and watch as your MMR shoots through the ranks. If this sounds like something you'd want to be a part of, head to the channel How to Join in their public Discord, which I'll leave a link to in the description. Thank you again to Rocket League University for bringing the information to this video, and let's carry on with the next part. Finally, we have come to our last talking point for understanding third man, which is preventing overflipping. Overflipping is when anyone outside the play flips towards the play when they're too close to begin with. This results in an overcommit and wastes that player's rotation. Simple in theory, but you'd be surprised with how often I see players not follow this very simple rule. As third man, you should be steadily moving around the field, really using boosts that you collect from small pads to help you gain speed. To make sure you don't overflip, check to see that you are at least one half a field away from the play. You should also never flip across zones, as this is another way to overcommit and push too close to your teammates who are already covering that space. Whew, it's a lot of information, but let's just hope you're tracking along well, because Jonk has actually put in some questions to test your knowledge on what's been covered so far. So, quiz time. Question number 1. Here we can see the orange team defending against a weak attack from the opponent and starting a counter attack. As the play progresses up the field, what about this position is wrong? The correct answer here was that Jonk, as the third man, pushed up unnecessarily, as we can see Sveb already covering that zone. Jonk pushed upfield instead of holding his position in the diagonal zone from where the play was going to be. Now Jonk eventually realizes his mistake and rotates out of the play into a better position, to which he would have been even earlier if he just held his position in the first place. This example should aim to really highlight the importance of holding your position, because nearly everyone who plays threes has a really unhealthy habit of pushing out too early or too far and suffering the consequences of poor positioning and ruining rotational flow. Second question. Here is a defensive position played by the orange team. Let's see if you can spot if they played correctly or not and why it did or didn't work out. After the ball is cleared deep into the orange half by Silwo, should Jonk or Cosmic take control of the ball? The correct answer is that Cosmic should be the one to jump for the ball, since he has more space and a better angle to work with. Jonk should be getting out of the way and rotating around his teammates to keep proper rotational flow and allow Sveb to play defensive zones as second man and hold front post until it's his time to become first man. Final question. In this situation, the orange team is maintaining pressure in the opponent's defensive third. Take note of Jonk and Sveb's positioning and how they rotate according to what's happening in the play. Is the way they rotate and cut each other here after a force 50 sends the ball across the field the correct move? This is completely fine, as this is a perfect example of first to third rotation. Sveb was especially positioned correctly, holding his position in the opponent's upper right zone, ready to turn back into a defensive third or become a first man via this first to third rotation. All Jonk has to do here is to keep good spacing as second man, not run a layer and decide to play for possession, or buy time once it's his turn to become first man. The orange team eventually scores after this play was handled correctly, and this is one of the most easy to replicate situations that you can apply to all of your own games. A lot of information to take in, a lot to study, so please, if you need to, go back, rewatch specific sections. If you think you struggle in the third man position, go back and watch that third man section. Break everything down for yourself and come back to this video if you think you need touch-ups on your positioning or anything while playing. This whole video is brought to you by Jonk and the guys over at Rocket League University, and they have presented a huge amount of advice and information for you to take forward into your games, so please do go check them out. And for me, as always, thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you next time.